Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Zendikar Rising and all of the spoilers that have come out today being September 4th. So yeah, we're going to break down every spoiler, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on it, and give you just my opinions. So why don't we jump right into this? Starting off, we have Disenchant. It's a 2-cost white instant, and it says destroy target artifact or enchantment. So this is currently legal in Standard. It was last reprinted in Core Set 2020, and it would be rotating out if it wasn't for this reprint. I think it's probably a pretty good card to keep around. It's very generic, very vanilla, but it's nice to be able to just be like, oh, I need enchantment removal, here's a card. So yeah. Next we have Attended Healer. It's a 4-cost white creature core cleric 2/3, and whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. And then you can pay 2 and a white, and another target cleric gains a lifelink until end of turn. So, yeah, we're seeing another card that cares about life gain and clerics, and I think that obviously makes a lot of sense, but it just makes me wonder, is there going to be like a black-white life gain? Because we saw another card that was in white-black that said whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, put a counter on it, and whenever I think it was a cleric does something, do something. So, I think this could definitely be interesting, and I like the fact that this isn't putting counters, it's instead doing 1/1 white cat creature token. So yeah, I actually really like this card. Next we have Kabira Takedown. It's a 2-cost white instant, and it deals damage equal to the number of creatures you control to target creature or planeswalker. And it's a land that enters the battlefield tapped, and you tap to add white. So yeah, I think this is a really powerful double-face card. I mean, I think removal on one side, land on another is really great. No matter how bad the removal is, you can throw this in a deck as a land. And I talked about this a little bit yesterday. You can use these in your deck in one of two ways. You can throw them in your deck as a land and use the other card as an emergency, or you can use the card on the left and then have the land as an emergency. And that's really dependent on how you build your deck. You may throw these in instead of lands, or you may throw these in instead of cards. And that's really dependent on which side you think you're going to play more. Now, I think that even if the removal is really bad, having your land be able to remove things is so powerful that even this, where the instant could literally do nothing, I think is a very good card and could make its way into a lot of different decks. I don't know how well this will do, but I think it is a powerful card, just in general. One thing I also want to say is, if you didn't see my other video I posted today, it was revealed that Kaldheim and Strixhaven are both going to have modal dual-faced cards, and that they're going to be a little bit different, and so yeah, if you guys want to check out that video, I highly recommend it. It also has a little bit of Kaldheim information in there as well. So yeah, why don't we move on to the next one? Next we have Fearless Fledgling. It's a 2-cost white creature griffin 1/1 with landfall, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put a 1/1 counter on Fearless Fledgling. It gains flying until end of turn. So yeah, this is essentially going to just, get bigger every time a land enters the battlefield, and if you can continue to put lands, it'll basically always have flying, and that's really powerful. Having a creature that gets bigger over time and has flying is pretty insane. So yeah, I would keep an eye out for this one in Limited. Next we have Merfolk Falconer. It's a 5-cost blue creature Merfolk wizard with flying, and whenever you cast a kicked spell, scry 2, and it's a 4/4. I think, scrying 2 is powerful, but for 5, you kind of want to do more. I mean, it's also a wizard for your parties. It's a Merfolk for Merfolk Tribal. It's a flyer for Flyer Tribal. So it does a lot of different things, but I don't know if it does really anything that well. For Wizard Tribal, you're going to be in multiple colors. You don't want double blue. Not wizard colors, sorry. For party, you are in double blue, so you really don't want to be doing that, because party is very multicolor centric, and like the kicker strategy is kind of weak here, and the Merfolk strategy, it's a little expensive. So yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of this card. Next we have Thieving Skydiver. It's a 2-cost blue creature Merfolk Rogue 2/1, and it has kicker X, and X can't be 0. So I believe this is what Mark Rosewater was referencing when he gave his Zendiklues, or his hints about Zendikar, that X is being used for something it's never been used before, which is kicker. And it says flying, whenever it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, gain control of target artifact with converted mana cost X or less. If that artifact is an equipment, attach it to Thieving Skydiver. So if you're playing like a Merfolk deck, or maybe a rogue deck, or maybe a party deck, this could be a really good inclusion in it. Because you don't have to pay the kicker. It's not like you're paying ahead of time for the creature in order to have that steal effect. If you just don't need the steal effect, well, this is a 2/1 for 2 with flying for 2. You know, that's not awful. But then you can add a little bit on top of it. And I think this is a perfect example of a good kicker card. And I would not be surprised if this sees a little bit of play. I don't know what artifacts currently are, you know, I guess you can steal the Witch's Oven if you want, if your opponent has that out. I don't know. We will really have to see, but if there's a lot of artifacts in the meta, I would not be surprised if this became a common sideboard card or even maybe a main board inclusion. Next, we have Seagate Restoration. It's a 7-cost blue sorcery, and it says draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. And so, yeah, this is a interesting card. You're going to basically double your hand size plus 1, and then you have no max hand size. That's a pretty good ability. It does cost 7. It is triple blue, but if you don't need that, or you draw this early, it's not a dead card because it can be Seagate Reborn. And so I think that's actually a very, like, we had a white version of this, so it looks like we're going to get a full cycle. Where it's a 7-cost sorcery, and it does something. Now, I think this one's a little bit better than the white one. The white one created 2 4/4s and then made your creatures indestructible for a whole turn cycle. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but like, and that's 8 power for 7 mana, but this feels like a pretty good card, although it does basically nothing right away, because most likely you're going to be out of mana after casting this for 7. But yeah, so I think this could be a very interesting card. Would not be surprised to see this in many decks. Again, all of these cards, even if the left card looks bad, there's a chance that you just, you know, oh, I'm fine with this one land coming in tapped. You know, if you're in a monocolored deck, I feel like you're running this card. Like, a mono blue deck is almost guaranteed running this card because, well, you know, you can pay 3 life if you really needed to come in tapped, but if you don't, if it's not a big deal, you have it enter tapped, and you just get this extra card if you need it. I love these double face cards. They allow you to fit these cards into so many more decks, and I think it's wonderful. Let me know what you guys think about double face card. Do you like how they are kind of auto includes in the fact that you can kind of just replace a land instead of replacing a spell? I don't know. And again, you can also replace spells if you want and have the backup land. Next, we have a Lithoform Blight. It's a 2-cost black enchantment or enchant land. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, so that's pretty good. Enchanted land loses all land types and abilities and has tap, add colorless, and tap, pay 1 life, add 1 mana of any color. So this is kind of interesting. You can play this on your land if you want to be able to make it tap for any color by paying life. You can put it on your land if your land has a bad ability, for instance, or you can put it on your opponent's land. Let's say you're playing in Historic Brawl. I don't believe Field of the Dead is banned there yet. You could play this on your opponent's Field of the Dead, and now their Field of the Dead is just a fancy tap land. So yeah, I like this. It can be used offensively, it can be used defensively, and I really like it. Next, we have Inscription of Ruin. It's a 3-cost black sorcery with kicker 2 black. So this is a new cycle, Inscriptions, and it says choose one. If this spell was kicked, choose any number instead. So target opponent discards 2 cards. So paying 3 to make someone discard 2 cards. That's pretty much on rate. Paying 3 to return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. A little expensive. We have one that can do up to 3, and you can also do 2 creatures and then put menace and death touch counter, so that's a little weak, but then we have destroy target creature with CMC 3 or less. That is weak. Eliminate is better. So you know, you're like, okay, so it's a slightly worse effect, but if you can pay 4 additional, so if you pay 7, you get to do all of these. And, you know, that might be like, oh, okay, whatever. But also you have to remember, you are getting versatility. If you put Eliminate in your deck and your opponent starts not playing any creatures and their kind of win con is in their hand, well, you can't just decide to make them discard 2 cards. But with this card, you can. So the versatility that it's a modal spell and the versatility that the modal spell has kicker means that this spell can be used in so many different ways that I think it's a pretty good card. And if it doesn't see play in Standard, it will see play in things like Brawl and Commander. Next, we have Hagra Byte. It's a 4-cost black instant. If any opponent controls no basic lands, this spell costs 1 less to cast. So if your opponent, and by the way, it destroys target creature. So if your opponent if we're talking about MTG Arena here, if your opponent has no basic lands, which is very rare in Standard, this is going to be murder. But generally in Standard, this is going to be 2 black, destroy target creature. But it's a land, and remember what I said about that kind of bad white kill spell, besides the fact that that white kill spell felt very red. But the idea here is that, you know, you can replace maybe 1 or 2 of your swamps with now this Hagra's Byte, and now you have both a spell and a land. And again, I know I keep going on about, oh, you know, options, but this is part of what makes Magic fun, is when do I play my cards? Do I play this as a land, or do I destroy something? And I mean, generally figuring out what to destroy and when to save your removal is very difficult, but this almost makes it more difficult as a player. What do you target with your removal? When do you use removal? Do you not use your removal and use it as a land? You know, this has so much versatility, and again, you can throw it into a deck as a kill spell with a land backup, or as a land with a spell backup, and I love that. Next, we have Expedition Champion, 3-cost red creature, human warrior, 2/3, and as long as you control another warrior, he gets +2/+0. So he's a 4/3 for 3 if you control another warrior. Otherwise, he's a 2/3. Generally, very filler, but it is a warrior, so that's cool. Next, we have Royal Eruption, 2-cost red sorcery. Royal Eruption deals 3 damage to any target. If the spell is kicked, it does 5. So I would say this is really good, but unfortunately, it's a sorcery. I mean, it's because of that, it is worse than like Lightning Strike or I would say Skewer the Critics even. But this gives you the option to be able to pay 5. But I feel like this is one of those options where I don't think kicker makes a whole lot of sense. Yes, it's nice that, hey, you can pay 5, but the fact that you're sacrificing so much, the fact that this is a sorcery may not seem that big, but think about it. How many times have you needed to kill a creature before someone boosted it to where it won't be killable by red magic? Killed something to prevent you from dying. Killed your opponent at instant speed. Any of that you can't do with this card. And yes, it's nice to be able to pay kicker, and I know Lightning Strike isn't in Standard, I understand that, but this card itself is just very, very meh. Next, we have Cinder Cladding. It's a 2-cost red instant with kicker red, and it deals 1 damage to each creature. If it's kicked, it deals 2. I actually really like this card. At instant speed, this is 1 red, deal 2 damage to each creature, which is slightly worse than Flame Sweep. Flame Sweep did 2 damage to each creature. It was 2 red, so it was easier to cast. 2 and a red, sorry. It was an instant, and it didn't hit your flying creatures, but this also has the versatility of, if your opponent has a bunch of 1/1s and maybe you have a bunch of 2/2s, you don't have to cast it for 2. You can choose 1 or 2 damage. So I actually think this may become a either good sideboard card or actually become part of, you know, something kind of competitive. I actually really like this. Next, we have Kazul's Fury, 3-cost red instant. As an additional cost to cast the spell, sack a creature, and whenever it deals damage equal to that sacrificed creature's power to any target. So this is Fling. So this costs 1 more than Fling, but you get to have it as a land. And this is one where I think, okay, paying 1 more I think is worth it. You don't want to print something that's just 100% better than Fling. And I think this actually is probably better than Fling. You know, you pay 2 and you pay 3, but you can also then have it enter tapped as a land if you, for instance, don't need to sacrifice something, have no creatures, don't want to sacrifice something, you know, any of that. So I really like it. Next, we have Kargan Intimidator. It's a 2-cost red creature, human warrior, 3/1, and it says cowards can't block warriors. So this is a reference to another card. I forget the first part, but it's another Intimidator, and it has an ability. Pay 1, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. Kargan Intimidator gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Pay 1, target creature becomes a coward until end of turn, or pay 1, target warrior gains trample until end of turn. So you can do each of those effects once. So theoretically, you could pay 3 mana and give him +1/+1, so make him a 4/2, make 1 creature not be able to block him, and give target warrior and have trample. So he becomes a 4/2 with trample that 1 certain creature can't block. But if you're playing this in, say, a warriors deck, then that creature can't block any of your warriors, which can be devastating to a deck that likes to just build 1 big creature and stop you from doing combat that way. In terms of what I think about this card, I think this card is amazing. A 3/1 for 2 that also has these abilities for such a cheap cost is very, very powerful. And I think this is it does a lot for a 2-drop. Next, we have Morag, Fury of Akoam, and I think this is a very interesting card. It's a 6-cost red legendary creature, Minotaur Warrior, 6/6, and each creature you control gets +1/+0 for each time it has attacked this turn. Now, this does mean that all your attacking creatures get +1/+0 because you will declare them as attacker, if I'm understanding this correctly. You will declare them as attackers. Boom, I've attacked once. It doesn't say dealt damage. So I've attacked once. And then essentially, it is going to, +1/+0, it's going to get bigger, so that kind of does that, but it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, if it's your main phase, there's an additional combat phase after this phase. At the beginning of that combat, untap all creatures you control. So there are a couple things to note about this. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, if it's your main phase. So if you do it at instant speed, it doesn't just create a combat step. What's interesting is that this doesn't create an extra main phase. Generally, what these do is they say an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase, but that doesn't happen. So if you want to really maximize this, what you have to do, also, by the way, it doesn't untap it. So if you just go to attacks normally, you just attack at your normal combat step and swing, and then you play a land, yes, you get another combat step, but all your creatures are tapped. So what you have to do is you have to play the land before combat, go to combat, and swing. Then you have another combat step directly after that. There's no main phase in between. So you go combat, you end in your second main phase. Then maybe you play another land somehow. If you do that, you get another combat step. And once that combat step is over, you move to end step. This does not create any extra main phases. So you are limited to pretty much 3 combats per thing. Now, I'm not sure if you can, I believe you may be able to if you can dump multiple lands down on the same main phase. So if you played Migration Path and threw 2 lands down and then played a land, you may get 3 combat steps in a row, but I'm not sure. That's something we'll have to figure out. But I think this is a very interesting commander, and I like landfall, get an extra combat. Very fun. Next we have Shatter Skull Smashing. It's X red for a sorcery, and it deals X damage divided as you choose among up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. If X is 6 or more, it deals twice X damage as you choose instead. So yeah, it can't hit players, but I think this is probably one of the better Mythic land ones. First off, it doesn't always cost 7, and it's kind of one of those more, it's removal. Like I said removal on a land is so good, especially a land now that can enter the battlefield untapped if you really need it. So it's not even that big of a sacrifice compared to a land that's always going to enter the battlefield tapped. So I think that this one is probably one of the best red Mythic, or not one of the best red Mythics, one of the best Mythic land that we've seen so far. Next we have Marassa Brute, 3-cost 3/3. It's a warrior, so keep that in mind. Next we have a Marassa Sproutling. It's a 3-cost green creature plant elemental with kicker 1 and a green, and when it enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target card with kicker from your graveyard to your hand. What's interesting about this is that if you play this, get it killed, then play another one, you can return that one, and it's kind of this loop of doing things. Now it is 5 mana every time you do that, but it is an interesting thing you may be able to pull off in limited, so keep that in mind. Next we have Iridescent, also it's really good in limited. Iridescent Horn Beetle, it's a 5-cost green creature insect. At the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each 1/1 counter you've put on creatures under your control this turn. We're kind of lucky proliferate's rotating out. If you could, play a land, boom, proliferate 5 creatures, get 5 1/1s. Maybe they enter the battlefield with counters now, which means that now when you proliferate, you're creating 10. That would get really insane really quick, but in something like Historic, I think this could be a really interesting card. Next we have Cragplate Pilath. It's a 7-cost green creature beast. This spell can't be countered and it has hexproof and haste, and it's a 6/6. But you can kick it for 3. So if you pay 10 mana, if it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters. So you either get a 6/6 hexproof haster for 7 or a 10/10. Sorry, I keep messing this up. A 10/10 for a 10 hexproof haster. So this feels very similar to Carnage Tyrant to me, except it has haste. It costs 1 more. It has slightly worse stats. So it is a little. I think it's on par with Carnage Tyrant, and Carnage Tyrant was actually pretty good in Standard. So I wouldn't be surprised if this saw some play. Next we have Lowell Mage's Familiar. 1 green blue for a creature beast, 2/4, and you can tap to add green or blue, so nice little mana dork. And whenever you cast a kick spell, you gain 2 life. So if you're playing a kicker deck, I think you're probably playing this mostly because these are the those are the colors you're in, and you're gonna gain some life, stall a little. I like the card. Next, we have Pilath World Sculptor. It's a 4 green red for a legendary creature elemental 5/5. And when it enters the battlefield, create a 0/1 green plant creature token for each basic land you control. Now, you are in 2 colors, so there's a high chance that not all your lands are basic. So let's say on average you get 5 to 4 plants with this. Then whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, put 4 +1/+1 counters on target plant you control. So this is a reference to Avenger of Zendikar, which was a 7-cost green normal creature, not legendary, that said when it enters the battlefield, create a plant for each land you control. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, put a land on each creature you control. A land? A +1/+1 counter on each plant you control. Sorry. This is a reference to it. But now, first off, this one can be your commander. It has a second color. It only cares about basics, so it's definitely been nerfed. It costs 1 less, but now it has an extra color, and it's requiring basics. So that's a little bit of a yikes. It is legendary, so you can't have both of them out, or you can't have 2 of them out at the same time. And the landfall, so if you are creating less than 4 plants, then this, I would say, is better than the old one, because you are technically putting more counters out on the board. But as soon as you start making more than 4 plants, which I think on average you will make 4 to 5 plants if you're playing this on curve, then this is worse. And I've seen a lot of people saying, oh my gosh, this is so much worse. It's cheaper. It's in like Commander or Brawl, it's giving you an extra color, and you're getting 4 counters instead of 1. But I think people are overreacting. I think this will be interesting in Brawl, but I don't know how powerful this will be in Standard, even with all the land dump. Next, we have Spare Supplies, 2-cost artifact. Spare Supplies enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then you can pay 2 and tap it and sack it to draw a card. And you can't do that the turn it comes in, obviously, because it comes in tapped. So in the end, it will have an artifact ETB, it'll draw you a card, it'll have an artifact death, and then it will draw you a card. I think this will be really interesting in a either an artifact-based deck or a Doom Foretold deck, where you're playing things and you want to have non-land permanents to sack, and just you play this, and also anything with Yorion is going to like that enter the battlefield ability. So yeah, I think this is definitely an interesting card. Alrighty guys, that's it for this video. Those were all the spoilers spoiled today. If I missed any, that's probably because they came out after I filmed the video, and I will talk about them tomorrow. Either way guys, if you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, let me know what you guys think about all the cards in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.